Okay, Dr. Murphy, I will turn it to you to begin our meeting.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Corinne Murphy. I serve as the Dean of the College of Education and Behavioral Sciences at Western Kentucky University, and I have the honor and privilege of co-leading this group with Lieutenant Governor Jackie Coleman, and I am excited to work with an elected official whose passion really is this work and what calls us all here today. And to that end, I want to thank you all for your efforts. We know that as we asked and made the call for participants to this work, we did so with the intention that this was not just going to be a show up and speak and then go home for a couple of weeks and then come back and speak again. There's going to be some work for everyone to do in between our meetings. And so we really appreciate everyone's dedication to this work and to the spirit of this work. This is the first meeting of our work group. So this is the first time that all of us are coming together. So we'll start today with obviously a welcome, but also a purpose so that we all have a centered point from which to work. And also just some brief introductions, who you are, really briefly what your role is, and what you hope to get from the group. Hopefully we can do this in less than 10 minutes or less, but it is important to make sure that we all know who each other is. And so I'm going to go around my screen. It's going to be a little bit of popcorn for all of you who know about popcorn in your classroom, but we'll start with Lieutenant Governor Jackie Coleman.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jacqueline Coleman, the current Lieutenant Governor and Secretary of Education and Workforce Development Cabinet. And I will be, I don't know what just happened. I'm clearly not in charge of tech here. There we go. I will be hopping in and out of this meeting as I have other ones as well, but I'm very committed to these issues and to working with you all. And I'm anxious to learn from you too.
Very good. Thank you. And Amanda, why don't we start since you're in my top left?
Sure. Amanda Ellis. I'm the Associate Vice President over K-12 policies and programs, and have the privilege of working with the Commonwealth Education Continuum very closely, and just glad to be here. And I look forward to hearing about your insights, suggestions, and solutions. Thank you.
Very good. Jennifer?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Fraker, and I'm the Executive Director for K-12 Policies and Programs. And sorry, I think there's an echo. There, better. Sorry, Amanda and I are actually in the same room at CPE today, which is amazing to be back in the building. So I guess now we have to get used to being back in the building. But I do have the privilege of working with the Continue on all the work groups, and super excited to get to know you all better and to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Terry Bradshaw.
Hi, I'm Sherri Bradshaw. I am the President and CEO of the Kentucky Capital Development Corporation, which is the economic development agency in Frankfort and Franklin County, and obviously a very large portion of our work goes toward workforce development and diversity and workforce development. I also serve on the foundation board of the Kentucky Association for Economic Development. So I look forward to working with you all. I am really sorry that you saw my name on the list and you thought it was going to be the other Terry Bradshaw, but this is all you get for today.
Nope, really happy with our attendance today. We're great. Thank you, Terry. Dallas Kratzer.
Okay, if I can find the mute button, I can get there. Hi, Dallas Kratzer. I'm with the Kentucky Commission on Military Affairs and workforce for veterans. So we're doing some projects that we're hoping will create opportunities for employment for our veterans. Thank you.
Great to have you, Dallas. Margaret Schroeder.
Hi, I'm Margaret Morris Schroeder, and I am a faculty member and associate dean in the College of Education at the University of Kentucky. I focus on working with our teacher education programs and especially their clinical field experiences. My background is in STEM education, math, and biology.
Thank you. Great to see you. The next person on my list, I don't know your first name, but I know your last name is Stevenson.
Hi, I'm Lisa Stevenson, and I'm from West Kentucky Community and Technical College. I serve as the Director of K-12 Partnerships at West Kentucky, and that encompasses a lot of things, but the big part of my job is dual credit opportunities and also for overseeing our community scholarship program, which is a gap-funded scholarship. And so when I look at the materials that were sent out, I have a student that went through that program, is biracial, and is now in his first year of teaching at the local middle school. So that's my passion about why I want to be here, is to see those other students take opportunities.
That's terrific. Thank you, Lisa. Sherri McGuffin.
Hi, everybody. I am Sherri McGuffin. I'm STEM coordinator for Advanced Kentucky. Basically, right now, my primary responsibilities are promoting computer science initiatives to K-12 teachers across the state. And our primary focus is equity and access in computer science to K-12. I'm also a statistics professor and on the statistics professor at Eastern Kentucky University, and serve on the faculty senate there. I'm former math and computer science teacher from Nelson County, and I have been a passionate advocate of computer science and equity in STEM for the past 25 years, and love to see what we're going to be doing here.
Very great to have you, Sherri. Soroya Matthews.
Hello, everyone. I'm Soroya Matthews, and I work, of course, in education. I work right now currently supporting and helping to guide the work with virtual learning in Fayette County Public Schools. I also serve as an adjunct professor in the Masters of Education program at Georgetown College. A lot of the work that I do is just around supporting, doing contract and consultancy work with schools and districts around curriculum, leadership, and all things equity. I do have a book on equity, actually, and I've done coursework. I've created coursework around catalyzing equity in the classroom and in school programs. So that's a little bit about me.
That's terrific. I look forward to reading some of that as well. Let's see, Heather Facey.
Well, hi, I'm Heather Facey. I'm not on this committee, but hello, I am here live streaming for you guys today. So I'll just introduce myself and I'm going to hop back out.
Heather, you're very important. You make sure we can do what we can do. And Lauren Norton.
Hey everyone, Lauren Norton. I'm a senior associate at Education Strategy Group. I can share a little bit more about us later in the agenda. We are excited to be sharing some national best practices both today and kind of moving forward with the working group around educator diversity, but really looking forward to learning from the wealth of knowledge in this group to hear about kind of existing great work across the state of Kentucky.
Very good. Thanks, Lauren. Jessica Romias.
Hi, I'm Jessica. I am with the Council on Post-Secondary Education. I work in diversity, equity, and inclusion, which includes overseeing our state policy for public post-secondary institutions. I also lead many projects under our Higher Equity campaign. I'm super excited to be able to collaborate with you all to address such a pressing need in our state. Thanks.
Good. Thanks for being here, Jessica. Nicole Osborne.
Hi, everyone. I'm an associate at ESG with Lauren Norton, here visiting to share some research that we've done on early educator pathways today, and really looking forward to hearing what you all are up to in Kentucky.
Very good. Senator Max Wise.
Hey everyone, Senator Max Wise, 16th Senate District, also the chairman of the Senate Education Committee. Looking forward to hearing many thoughts and many ideas as I work on policy issues in the Commonwealth and the legislature. Thanks for allowing me to be a part of this.
Thanks for being with us, Senator. Kim Haverkos.
Hi, I'm Kim Haverkos. I'm from Thomas More University. I'm the Dean of the College of Education and Health Sciences, also a former STEM teacher, so I am absolutely passionate about this work as well. Looking forward to working with everybody.
Very great to see you, Kim. Logan Justice.
Hello, everyone. I'm Logan. I serve as a K-12 representative on the continuum. And then I also serve as a national officer and vice president of membership for a career and technical student organization called Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America, or FCCLA. I will just say to Lieutenant Governor, to the random introduction at the basketball game at Dunbar that one time, I was that person. So kind of put a face to the name, but yeah, so it's nice to be here and working with everyone.
That's great. See, I feel like I know you already.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, welcome, Logan. Jim Flynn.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jim Flynn with the Kentucky Association of School Superintendents, and I was a superintendent in Kentucky for 16 years. And so this work group is near and dear to my heart. In fact, when I was a high school principal, I worked with a teacher who always reminded me it's the people, not the programs, that make the school. And so if we really want to improve education and learning outcomes, in our state, it hinges on the quality of the professionals that are leading our classrooms. And so I'm very passionate and excited about this work. So thanks for giving me an opportunity to be here.
Thanks, Jim. Bryn Martin.
Hello, from Northeastern Kentucky. I'm a parent advocate. I have served on many committees at a national, state, and local level. And I've helped to work on a diversity plan for Kentucky PTA when I was on the board. I've done workshops and trainings on advocacy, diversity at state conventions and national conventions, as well as panels on the achievement gap and increasing their graduation rate and those kinds of things. So I'm very excited to be here. I also have a background in STEM. I used to be an IBM computer programmer and has started some STEM after school program and summer camp for middle school students. So I really want to speak to the young lady who I think was McGuffin, who works with that. So I'm excited to be here and hopefully increase the diversity and the training and resources for those wanting to go into education.
Very good. Thank you, Bryn. Okay, Ellie Gilbert.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ellie Gilbert with the Kentucky Department of Education. I'm a consultant in the Division of Educator Recruitment and Development in the Office of Educator Licensure and Effectiveness. My primary job is communications with the Go Teach KY program. We have various social media campaigns and other avenues of communication to elevate the teaching profession, to create visibility. We want to showcase opportunities and ultimately recruit and retain the very best teachers that we can for Kentucky's kids. So I'm excited to be here.
Very good. Thanks, Ellie. Susan Reber.
Good afternoon. My name is Susan Reber. I'm Chief of Staff for the Lieutenant Governor and for the Education and Workforce Development Cabinet. And I wanted to say hi to Terry Bradshaw. Hadn't seen you in a long time and I recognized your voice. Good to see you.
Very good. Thanks for being here, Susan. Cameron White McDaniel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cameron White McDaniel. I recognize several faces on here. I am currently a school counselor at Dunbar High School, so Logan is one of my students. And prior to that, I was a teacher. I was a family consumer science teacher. I've taught in Jefferson County and now Fayette County. And additionally, I am a doctoral student at the University of Kentucky. I am currently working on my doctorate in educational psychology. And so I had this opportunity to work with you all through an internship that I am working with Dr. Ellis on, and very excited to be here with all of you. I am going to turn my camera off because for some reason Zoom keeps dropping on my side of things. So I'm hoping that the less I have going on, then the more consistent it will be. But nice to meet everyone.
Call those the bandwidth games, Cameron.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you for being here. Eddie Campbell.
Hello, everyone. I'm Eddie Campbell. I'm a middle and high school music teacher from Knox County, currently serving as president of the Kentucky Education Association. And of course, I have a big passion for high quality educators for all of our students all across Kentucky, but especially making sure that our education workforce is as diverse as the students that are being taught every single day.
That would be a fantastic outcome. Penny.
Hello, sorry. Hi. So I am Penny Christian. I am 16th District PTA President, which is Fayette County, but I am also on the Kentucky PTA. I am here as a parent representative to speak for all families. My focus is family engagement, but also for parents and families of color so that they can re-find their voices that somehow over the years has been taken away.
Thanks for being with us, Penny. I think we have everyone. Did I miss anyone? Okay, terrific. So thank you all. We're gonna get to know each other quite well over the coming months. As you know, this is one work group out of 3 that make up the efforts and support the efforts of the full continuum. So I thought for this group, it might be good to hear 1 minute of what the overarching continuum really is, and then how our work group fits into that. And so I would offer, if Lieutenant Governor Coleman wants to take that, or or Dr. Ellis, either one who wants the 1 minute to say, here's what the continuum overarching is.
Amanda is so eloquent that I'm going to let her take that.
Very good.
I think what Lieutenant Governor is saying is she does this in her sleep pretty much. No, I'm happy to do that. So the 1 minute elevator speech basically is with the combined efforts with Lieutenant Governor, President Thompson, and Commissioner Glass. Combined forces truly is what we have in the resolution to create a Commonwealth education continuum, to really look at the entire system from preschool all the way through career. So we call it P20 because it's even into advanced degrees and into career. And with the goal of really improving the entire pipeline for our students from beginning to end. Knowing we can't capture all that in 1 year, as Dr. Thompson would say, there are potholes or missing pieces in our pipeline that need to be strengthened to improve outcomes and opportunities for our students. Where we're starting is this year right now is really around that pipeline transitional piece from when you go from P12 into post-secondary, that transitional piece, the opportunities that students had before, which one of our work groups is the early post-secondary opportunities. That was something that was elevated by the continuum as wanting to know more about that. How do we increase access? How do we increase completion and really opportunities for all students to really have exposure and opportunities for those early post-secondary opportunities. The other group is successful post-secondary transition. How do we really build a seamless transition for students to prepare them around affordability, advising, really helping them to navigate into that next step. And that could be a 2-year, 4-year institution. It could be into credentialing, but really, how do you get there into the military? How do you get there? And how do you successfully sustain? And then we know that students aren't going to be able to do any of those things if they don't have this work group, which is focused on the teacher workforce and the importance of our teacher workforce, that they are highly qualified, and also that we have a diverse teacher workforce to really be a lot more reflective of our student population, which we are not. And so that is why you're here serving on this committee, which I'm so grateful for Lieutenant Governor and Dr. Murphy for doing this work, for leading this work, because this isn't going to just end after a few months. This is just the beginning. And as Dr. Murphy said, this is a group that I know our 3 co-leads are adamant about, that we are around action, that we make recommendations for change, policy change, improving communication, and really elevating the voices of Kentucky of what to listen to, what is needed, but to also promote bright spots and really think holistically about how we change. And we know that one agency can't do that, or one person. It really takes a collective body of commitment that change. And so you're also going to hear a little bit about today, and I won't say any more after this, is that we're going to be with our partners at Education Strategies Group, which you have met a couple of our new colleagues, I call them our colleagues for sure, who are going to be conducting focus groups and interviews around these topics, because one of the goals of our continuum, and many of our members are on this committee, is not just doing work, but really listening and hearing the voices of those who have historically been marginalized in the system. And so we are committed to that. We know that our state is very culturally rich and diverse, and we recognize that. And so we're really tapping into the different regions of our state to ask similar questions and learn about the experiences, not to assume that there's a generalized answer or a generalized challenge, but to be aware of that. So it's exciting work. It's a lot of work, but certainly if it enhances the opportunities and lives of our students, then it's worth every minute. So I will stop there. And if I've missed anything, co-leads, please let me know, but I'll let you continue on.
Corinne, if you're talking, you're muted.
Thank you, co-lead. That was very helpful. See, I said all of these amazing things, and now we're just going to be stuck with plan B. Okay, so hopefully everybody, Amanda set this up very well. Everyone can see the shared document on the screen. This was part of the email invitation that you received for today's group. This was the outcome document of some of the initial conversations and small groups from the continuum. So the continuum met. We worked everybody through the idea of teacher workforce and diversifying the teacher workforce. So this document represents and reflects the questions that came out of that large group activity, as well as possibly some sample goals and some potential research questions. We're not held to this, but I wanted to show it to all of you. We wanted to show it to all of you so that you had a starting point for what questions we were considering as the continuum group, but also what are some of the potential outcomes of the group. So this would serve as a source and a foundation for our activity. And then we're also going to today spend some time with ESG, where they're going to provide us information on the national trends and activities related to both enhancing the workforce and the culturally rich aspects of our workforce, but also increasing our individuals within our workforce, because we know both of those items, enhancing diversity and increasing the number of teacher candidates within our workforce who are highly qualified to, and I don't mean highly qualified by any means other than they're fabulous teachers and they are working to help our students of the Commonwealth eventually become fabulous citizens of the Commonwealth who can contribute to our society. So those are our questions. And before we get to ESG, we also want to recognize that all of you on this group are fantastically passionate about this work. And that's why you volunteered. And so that also likely means that you have 1, 2, 3, or maybe even 10 ideas on how we can already accomplish this. What are some things that you know in your heart and mind that if we as Kentuckians were to do the following X, Y, or Z, we would make progress towards these goals? And so knowing that, and knowing that those are some burning things that everybody wants to chat about and share about, we're going to actually show you a document, I think, if I can pull it up, unless someone has it right away available. This is a working document for all of us. Hold on, sorry. Make sure it's a Google Doc that we all can use throughout this entire process. You know when you have too many screens open? That's the moment for me right now. Here we go. Got it. Okay. Hopefully everyone right now is looking at a Google Doc. Amanda termed this the other day a parking lot, which I love. This is a parking lot of ideas. So bring your ideas, park your ideas, and we can continue to go back to this, continue to look at this document throughout. I love Google Docs because I can see you all actively engaging already on this document. But essentially, what are some of the ideas that you already have coming to the table, knowing that you have had a variety of different experiences, and everyone on this call is coming from a slightly different angle in how they want to address and how their experience can serve to inform this conversation. So this is going to be an ongoing working document. You all can access it any time of night that you want. If it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you pop your head up and say, I have this amazing idea and this is going to fix our entire it's going to be the solution for everything. You can just pop on here, not have to, talk to anybody else at 2 o'clock in the morning and write your ideas. So we've started some of these ideas already, which are terrific. The idea of implicit bias training for every district, so that as they are hiring, those factors don't accidentally become part of their hiring practices. And so any number of ideas that you all have, we would encourage you to put them on this sheet as we go forward. Lieutenant Governor Coleman or Amanda, did anybody else have anything else they wanted to share about this particular option and activity?
The link is in the chat, just in case you're looking for it. It is in the chat. You should be able to access it, but no, if not, just put a note in the chat and I'll be happy to fix it.
Okay, does anybody have any questions about this Google Doc? Okay, perfect. We'll try to
wait, I do. I'm sorry, I forgot to
you're
hit unmute. For that first one where it says implicit bias training be the first state for every district, have we, and I'm looking at number 3, which sort of answers that question, but how serious could we consider putting this at the pre-service level? Because one thing, and working with Pritchard, we've talked a lot about the statewide family engagement grant. We talk a lot about embedding this in the teacher education programs when they are undergrads, because if they haven't seen it before, when they have to have a mandatory PD or they have something that wasn't taught to them, they may be a little bit more resistant and less willing to incorporate it into their cash. So my question is for implicit bias training, and I'm going to also add family engagement pieces, putting that into that and making it more than just a PD, putting it and embedding it in the training. How possible is that?
So Penny, I think she might have stepped off the call for the moment, but I will absolutely say that's a possibility. It can be one of the recommendations of this work group to the continuum that we include all of those things. And even if they are state level, whether it's training or educator preparation, or whether it has to do with legislative changes or process changes, we have the full flexibility of all avenues to make change in this moment, which is exciting because it only happens once every 10 years. But that's right. Really what we want to see.
I did lose some volume, so if you said that already, my apologies, but I did lose you for a second.
Oh, that's okay. That's exactly the kind of conversation that we want to have and the kind of conversation that we want to see. The idea that we were to incorporate culturally responsive training into the educator preparation standards consistent with the revisions that just happened for the PSEL standards, that is something that Lieutenant Governor Coleman is really passionate about. And so absolutely, those are the kinds of entries that we would love to see on this Google form just as a running document. And look, everybody's already active, which is terrific. Now, don't try to multitask. When we're doing the other parts, make sure that you just kind of park this over here. But no, that's exciting. I love to see everybody engaging on that. And we hope you all find that very useful. Any other questions about it? Okay, hearing none and knowing that we are almost close to schedule, which is exciting, I'm actually going to shift this over to Lauren, you and your ESG colleagues so that we can hear what is the national landscape and framework for this work.
Yeah, thank you so much. So again, just a little quick introduction about ESG for those of you who we have not had the chance to meet quite yet. I see several familiar faces from our Commonwealth meetings. But ESG is a national mission-based consulting firm I know I'm joining you from Charlotte, North Carolina, and Nicole is joining us from Syracuse. So we're really here to bring the national perspective to this work. And again, just share some of the best practices that we've seen from other states kind of across the country. But all of our work at ESG really is focused on kind of bridging K-12 higher ed and workforce to support student success, particularly for low-income students and students of color. So a lot of our day-to-day work looks just like this. So working with other states who have really made a commitment to improve students' post-secondary transitions and attainment, whether that's around dual credit or around math pathways or a number of other really important issues that the Commonwealth is addressing. So wanted to share, Nicole will be taking the primary lead on the presentation perspective today, but wanted to share some research that our team has recently done around early educator pathways. So I think we have seen, and everyone on this call would agree, that it's really important for students to have teachers, and we would expand, to counselors and other educators, that look like them, that they can see themselves in and have kind of shared experiences across a number of different factors, whether that's race, ethnicity, geography, gender. But one kind of untapped area that we've seen is around early educator pathways, which we mean trying to think about how are we recruiting students as early as middle school or high school to really build their confidence that teaching is a valuable profession, and providing really accessible ways for them to kind of enter the profession, kind of starting early. So Nicole's going to share a little bit of that research. Again, this is a little bit less focused on, and we certainly would welcome any additions around kind of the more traditional ways of kind of building the teacher pipeline, whether that's kind of apprenticeships or alternative certification programs, some of which are embedded in the early educator pathway research. But I think ours is a little bit more focused, again, in that kind of earlier space. As we go through, would recommend, I think we'll probably, just so we don't have questions popping up that are on like the next slide, which tends to happen a lot, we're going to save questions until the end, but please keep track of any questions. Feel free to throw them in the chat. There will be time to answer any questions from the group on this research, but also really want to hear to our earlier comments about like, where are you already seeing some of this happening in the work that you do in Kentucky? What do you think could have kind of the most value for the state in increasing teacher diversity and increasing the teacher pipeline? What's missing? I think we'll have the opportunity to really answer all three of those questions kind of after the discussion. So feel free to keep notes. If there's any ideas that you like, feel free to put them in that parking lot document that Dr. Murphy just shared too, kind of all open. But otherwise, I'm going to share my screen and then I'll pass it to Nicole to get us started.
And Lauren, as you're popping that up, which it's a fabulous intro to, and it's going to be a fabulous foundation for our conversations, I want to offer to you and I've lost her name. Who else?
Nicole.
Nicole, thank you. Sorry, Nicole. So I want to offer to you and Nicole that I think one of the things Amanda shared with me from Monday's work group was that the learning opportunity that we have right now to really hear about the national trends really supersedes what our own experience has been, because we only know what we know, right? And so this is a terrific opportunity. And so for Lauren and Nicole, I really want to make sure that you guys feel comfortable with the time that you have, and you can use as much time as is needed so that we can all really have a very good in-depth understanding of what the national landscape for this work looks like.
All right, it looks like I am not assigned as a co-host, so I cannot share my screen. So I don't know if any of you folks who are hosts or co-hosts would be able to grant me access. I can pull up our deck.
You are free to go forth and do.
Perfect, thank you. All right, I will pass it to Nicole.
All right, so thank you all for having us here today. Like Lauren said, I'm just going to share some research that we completed earlier this year around early educator pathways. As Lauren mentioned, I just want to reiterate that this research was really focused on the early piece, so starting in high school through licensure and back into the workforce. So I heard Ms. Ellis speak to potholes earlier. This is our example of leaky pipe, which is a similar illustration here. So overall, we lack a systemic approach to educator pathways that do start in high school with a high school education and training program. So specifically looking within CTE programs funded by Perkins dollars. We surveyed a bunch of people across the state. We had about 40 interviews. We did a lot of desk research, and we're really trying to highlight best practices and illuminate places in the country that were completing this work. So the most promising partnerships that we found were between high schools and two-year institutions through early college models. So even in those models, though, the leaky pipe exemplar is illustrated here because too often one partner only focuses on their segment of the pipeline, which results in a loss of quality candidates. So credit and transfer is certainly one area of the leaky pipe, but gaps also occur because it's treated like a relay race in which the high school kind of stops focusing on students when students graduate, and maybe they hand them off to a community college who in turn drops their focus once they graduate and enroll in the educator preparation program. And then too often, education prep programs stop supporting students at the licensure stage, although some institutions do support placement assistance for their candidates. So what we really need here is a pipeline that reflects the supply chain of the teacher pipeline. So in our view, teacher pathways are one of the few pathway programs in which high schools are both the supplier and the consumer at the end of the supply chain. And we have the ability through solid educator prep programs to have feedback loops at each segment, but only if we build the infrastructure and partnerships necessary in order to succeed. So on the next slide here, we have some clear themes that were pervasive throughout our research across the field. I think some of these were already highlighted in the parking lot document here that was shared, but overall, a big picture of early educator pathways is that there are many, many programs across the country that are doing pieces of this work well, but there's very few that are doing all three important things well that we identified through our research, which was diversity, acceleration, and affordability. Affordability meaning the actual, if we could go back to slide 4, sorry. There we go. The affordability piece that we were speaking to is really the affordability of the actual bachelor's degree and the time to licensure. So on the next slide, we have our theory of action, which was to retain, develop, recruit, develop, and retain students. So this is just a graphic representation along with some of the key components that we included in each phase of the pathway. And I'll just briefly talk through each phase here and what we found across the field. So recruitment was by far one of the most underutilized phases of our theory of action. Several sites that we spoke to mentioned a commitment to diversity and wanting to diversify their teaching workforce. But when we pressed them to identify specific strategies that they were employing to recruit diverse learners into educator pipelines, they defaulted to things like site visits, assemblies at schools, or classroom visits, and really lacked a clear set of strategies to recruit diverse learners and lacked a connection to the current systems already in place. For example, using career exploration programs, interest and aptitude surveys, or connections to existing community organizations or faith-based organizations were not themes that we heard very often. Within the development phase, this was probably the most structured within early educator pathways. So there's a clear understanding of the need for a sequence of courses with a strong curriculum mapped to educator prep programs, which also include clinical or real-world work experiences. And there was also a fundamental connection and understanding to dual enrollment as a way to directly connect the pathway to educator prep programs at the post-secondary level. However, there's a lack of explicit partnership agreements within the pipeline, and there's very little consistency, for example, in the number of dual enrollment courses or the types of dual enrollment courses that would be offered. So this also led to a limited acceleration to and through the bachelor's degree program. And then thirdly, on the retention front, this was even more disjointed than the recruitment pieces. So we were specifically looking at the affordability of programs, which was pretty sparse. There's a lack of data systems to be able to track students through the pathway, and there's rarely support for educator and training completers after they're actually hired into a school district within their first 3 to 5 years of teaching. So if you think back through the pipeline picture, there are leaks across the pipeline from high school to post-secondary, and there's little done to track participants truly into educator prep programs and district teaching positions to determine if those new teachers were successful and if they could be tied back to a pipeline program. So on the next slide, you'll see our 3 quality components that we were looking at: diversity, acceleration, and affordability. And there are a few core examples of programs that met some of our expectations here. So 2 of the state examples that we identified through our research were the Center for Educator Recruitment, Retention, and Advancement in South Carolina and the Golden Apple program in Illinois. And so I'll briefly speak to those, starting with Sarah. So Sarah has 3 programs to recruit and develop students as teachers. It starts in middle school with a proteins program, through teacher cadets in high school, and fellowships at the collegiate level. I think some folks might be familiar with this. With this program, they work with states across the country to share their curriculum as well. And so just a couple of ways that they were able to measure student outcomes. They partner with the What Works Clearinghouse to report on program performance, and they also are able to report on gender and race, although race is not a denominator that's specifically looked at when they're recruiting students at the middle school level. However, they do have placement and persistence data. And one of the measures that they were keenly aware of was conducting a pre and post program survey in order to compare student perceptions of teaching and education careers before and after they participated in the program. Moving on to Golden Apple, which is Illinois' program. Both of these programs, by the way, are funded by the state legislature. So the Illinois Golden Apple Scholarship Program is focused on recruiting high school students. They start as seniors, and they also recruit for sophomores in college as well as college freshmen. And so scholars receive support such as social emotional support, academic support, help finding the right teaching placement, and mentorship in their first years of teaching. One of the pieces I think that was also in the parking lot on your document was paying students for their teaching experience. And so students in this program actually do receive a stipend for their program and their professional development that they complete over the summer. But some of the data that they collect is on the number of scholars in the program, school characteristics of the placements, their first generation college going status, post-secondary performance grades, like I said, participation in the paid professional development, graduation rates, And they're also doing some research as well to be able to identify the number of students who are completing their teaching requirement in a community in which they are from. So thinking about the actual like geographic disbursement of their candidates and where they're teaching. They also receive teacher data, so they have summative and end of year evaluation reports from districts or the charter school operators approved evaluation system. Next slide. So like I said, we spoke to about 40 people across the country, did a lot of research, and what we found is that there are models that are very, very close to the vision that we were looking for high quality early educator pathways. But some of them are very new and they haven't seen a full cohort of students graduate from their program. So there really isn't any data to share outcomes level reports on their practices. But there are a few places that you could look into and build from, but there might need to be some additional components added to that work and built in to make sure that all of the pieces are in line with what your goals are.
I will go ahead and close us off with where we see some opportunities in Kentucky. Hopefully this is not new to you, but our team, as kind of the last phase of the work, did a kind of 50 state landscape scan to see which states had the greatest opportunity to put some of these really strong early educator pathways into place. And Kentucky was in their like top 3 states that really has a lot of the enabling conditions to make some of these promising opportunities happen. Some of those in Kentucky, first, I think we at ESG are constantly heralding all of the great data work that is happening in Kentucky. So having the really strong statewide longitudinal data system allows you to really leverage data in the development of early educator pathways. You already have some strategies in place I'll cover on the next slide, and I know you all have many more on recruiting diverse learners. The state already has strong policies around dual enrollment, particularly around credit transfer, which was a big barrier in a lot of other states, as well as to ensure community college to 4-year credit transfer. So again, continuing to support potential educators along that pipeline and avoid some of those leaks in the system. Already have some alternative teacher prep programs, as well as state promise and scholarship programs to address some of the affordability issues that we have seen in some other places. And so I believe this was shared out in the kind of pre-meeting materials, but wanted to highlight it again as just a really promising program that you already have in your state, and that's the Kentucky Academy for Equity in Teaching. So state is already devoting $1 million to relaunch the program, and really it contains a lot of the elements that Nicole outlined a little bit earlier, including kind of grow your own grants to districts to encourage their own high school students to pursue a degree in education, has different elements around financial aid and mentorship to support students in that kind of development and retention spaces of their theory of action that Nicole shared, as well as expanding high quality alternative pathways to certification, which we know can be really important for increasing the diversity of candidates. And then lastly, working to develop a research-driven cultural competency and equity modules available to all Kentucky educators, not just potential educators in this program. So we see this as a really big opportunity and are excited that Kentucky has made this one of its top priorities for the continuum, and are excited to hear kind of other examples that you've seen kind of throughout the state for this work. So I will stop sharing screen. We'll make sure that this deck gets shared out after the meeting so that you have access to it. But Dr. Murphy, might pass back to you, and we can see if there are other questions or how we want to kind of move from here.
Well, I want to thank you both, Nicole and Lauren. That is really good news to hear and really sad news to hear simultaneously, right? The idea that there are good things happening, but they're so recent that we don't have enough data to inform next steps, but there are really great things happening. I want to offer to the group an opportunity really to ask Lauren and Nicole questions about the research, who they talked to, how they how they determined what it was that you guys were going to ask? What kind of questions do you all have? I will start. Nicole, earlier, few slides ago, you mentioned that there were about 40 or so folks that you spoke with in order to gain that information. How did you go about determining who were the 40 and what constituted that group?
Great question. So we really started with some recommendations from the leaders of this research that we were doing. So, you know, kind of, we hear that there's some cool things happening in Philadelphia, for example, with the Center for Black Educator Development. Can you go like talk to them more and see, you know, what they're doing and how it might fit into this vision? And then from there, really used our networks as well as just getting more information. Like as we spoke to one person, they'd say, oh, you should really go speak to people at Texas Tech. And so it was really a combination of referrals and desk research to identify some nascent programs. I think that's really where we got like the word of mouth. And then of course, there is a piece that I think we didn't explicitly touch on, but when you think about educator prep, a lot of folks think about alternative prep pathways. So we spoke to Relay, we spoke to Blue Engine. So we also kind of tried to look at the field and thinking about the boot camp model, like TFA and Relay, and how that works in theory for adults, but how could we back into the model and apply it to high school students? So we really kind of covered a wide range of programs at the high school level as well as post-secondary level. And also the two examples that I mentioned, those were at the state level. So it was a hodgepodge of folks.
Well, that certainly serves to inform our work. Part of our work for everyone is the idea that we're going to not just develop some research questions, but also provide ESG with a list of, and it can be an ongoing list, but a list of who are the folks that we need to talk to. Who do we need to ask these questions of to make sure that we're getting all of the inputs from the different sectors. For example, just yesterday, I had a superintendent call me and say, Corinne, I need your help. It has to do with math teachers, but it's so specific because we can't certify math teachers because math teachers can't necessarily pass the trigonometry part of the praxis exam, yet trigonometry is not actually taught in the majority of high school curricula. So why are we holding that? And can we do something where we hire one math teacher who can pass the trigonometry part and then give them a bonus? So even so those are the kinds of these nuanced conversations that we know happen all across the state. One of our big jobs for this group is to say, how do we capture those? So thank you, Nicole.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'd also add, I know there was a question in the chat about the actual licensure exam. We didn't dig deep into that because our focus is really on that. I think for the benefit of our research, that was more of like a externality in some ways. Like there's a lot of conversation about the equity and the value of licensures. And so we didn't really want to touch that specifically, but to your point, Dr. Murphy, the feedback loops and the data that could be provided might be, we actually noticed that students exiting programs in XY, locations struggle with trigonometry. So at the post-secondary, at community college level, and even at the high school level, how can we enrich trigonometry, or what are the specifics that students are struggling with within each segment of this pipeline, and how do you prepare them on the front end to deal with that? And you really need a more granular view of student performance and challenges in order to create that feedback loop and that continuous improvement process.
That's super helpful. other questions that the group has of Nicole and Lauren, given what they just presented?
Nicole, Eddie Campbell here. You talked a little bit about placement programs where people were going through and then were actively placed into a guaranteed position. Could you dig down a little bit more into that and what that looks like?
Sure. So the placement that I was referencing was really within a scholarship program. So it's a student teacher placement. We spoke to, from the high school perspective, though, we kind of toyed with this idea that, you know, if you have a student who is in high school and they raise their hand and say, I want to be a teacher, they go through the pipeline, what can you do to guarantee them at some level a job when they graduate and become certified? So there's some pieces that we heard, for example, in Washington State, Burlington Edison High School, it's a Grow Your Own program. And they were working with their HR department to basically say, you know, if one of our alumni from the education and training cluster applies for a job, they're at least guaranteed an interview, for example. Other things might just be having, you know, the HR system in place and attached to the student information system to have something on that student's record on their transcript to say they were a education and training completer, and this is how we might review their application, or at least to be able to say I hired them, right? Because right now a lot of places don't have that level of data collection, and so it really would just have to be like word of mouth, or like, oh yeah, I know that kid because I taught them, and there's not a systemic approach.
Nicole and Lauren, as you were doing your research, I know that the state of Colorado, I think it's a state of Colorado in 2018 launched a teacher recruitment, student, you know, educator preparation student recruitment initiative to really enhance their workforce. Did you come across any of that work, and is there anything there that we could use to inform our work?
So we spoke to the Grow Your Own program at the University of Colorado. Didn't speak to anybody at the state level, but I think that the findings there really were pretty much aligned with the Grow Your Own programs and the diversity piece. So at the University of Colorado, it was one woman who, it was her pet project essentially to do this Grow Your Own, which I think is often what we see with Grow Your Own programs. It's usually one professor or one teacher who develops relationships with students and is, you know, doing the best that they can, but often don't have the actual support of the entire system to sustain the work. So that's overall what I recall from our conversation with them, but I could definitely loop back in with our notes and see if there was any highlights from Colorado.
Absolutely. That would be helpful. I know that there was some state level funding that was used to support some broader communication efforts, especially advertising around the image of teaching, the respect related to teaching. And I think those have come up a little bit already with the Continuum members, but also I'm seeing some of the activity on the parking lot page related to that as well. So that would be super helpful. Dallas, it looks like you have your hand up if I'm watching Zoom correctly.
You are. I thought I would use that function to jump in here and ask a question about what you found, or if you found anything nationally on recruiting veterans, those that are leaving the military or retiring from the military, to come in and teach. Here in Kentucky, we've got the NTI that will help them transition into teaching positions, but we're trying to stand up something in the cybersecurity area, IT area. Have you seen anything nationally that you might be able to share with us that could help us in that area?
So most of my work is at the K-12 level, so I have not delved into the Veterans and Military Affairs workforce, but it's definitely an interesting question that I think we could look into a little bit more.
Great, would be glad to help you with that. There used to be a program called Troops to Teachers, but it didn't execute very well. I think there's a great way to do it, and we're going to try it here in Kentucky. And yes, it is a pet project of mine. So I'm going to hang out a long time to do this because I'm a Kentuckian. I'm here for the duration, and yeah, we'll just go from there. If you want to talk more about it, let me know. And Sherri, I would love to talk with you about your program, Cybersecurity IT, more. So we'll connect later.
I love that everyone on this call has volunteered and yet all of the connections run abound. I think that's terrific. And as I'm listening to Dallas and Nicole, as you both speak, I'm also thinking junior ROTC, right? We have a robust junior ROTC program, and isn't that a nice match between, Nicole, your efforts around looking at the K-12 options and launching into educator preparation, and Dallas, your work with how do we marry these two ideas together? There's definitely some options there.
So you brought up junior ROTC. I'll tag on to a discussion I had with them last week. They want to expand computer science opportunities at the 15 Air Force junior ROTC programs we have here in Kentucky. And I think we need to get a chance to bring in military trained people into our school system to be instructors for those types of things. So you're spot on, Dr. Murphy. So let's see what we can do here.
Good, very good. And Lauren, thank you for the update in the chat. It sounds like we've got some leads on some of Colorado's efforts and apparently a new DEI curricula that they've launched. Is that right, Lauren?
Yep, that is right. So I think they just launched it in this past year. So still building out, but they have a lot of different modules that you can access on their platform for free that they're making available to their higher ed faculty, again, with plans to build out additional modules that they can share with their K-12 educators and counselors.
Terrific. Other questions for Lauren or Nicole?
I might just add, I see a comment in the chat from Jim, excuse me, about the paid positions that are funded, and the peer tutoring piece I think is really interesting because through our research, we spoke to the Center for Black Educator Development, which is based in Philadelphia, and essentially the high school students are tutoring first, like kindergartners, first graders and second graders in reading and math. But what was interesting is that they did not have any types of barriers for the high school students to participate. They just had to like read above a third grade reading level. So it kind of makes you think about like what are the core objectives that you need a high school student to learn while they're student teaching and while they're getting this experience. And as long as you can read a little bit more than the students that you're teaching, you know, they still found positive results from their summer tutoring based on pre and post assessments of the elementary students. So I think that's a really interesting piece when you think about the work experience that high school students can actually do. When we think about, you know, work-based learning and internships, sometimes it might seem like, oh, well, can a high school student handle a small group of little people? And often the answer is yes, as long as, you know, there's some facilitation involved and clear training and strategies. But even with the academic outcomes, they still found positive movement, and the students at the high school level were paid for their tutoring. So there's an equity piece as well when you think about, do students have the ability to either take an unpaid student teaching job or work, you know, in retail or like whatever their part-time job is while they're working through school. We wouldn't want students to not choose teaching because they need to make a living and support their families. So just thinking through some of the pieces there and what's really possible and how you can get creative with local funding through summer jobs programs and things like that to see movement in young people's lives at both the learner and the teacher level.
Nicole, did you see any partnerships between the private sector and the private sector and the incentivization for young people to become teachers? And by that, I think of, I don't know, there are a lot of great ones that McDonald's is a prime example of how they promote their high school workforce and incentivize them to move on to bigger and better things. Did you see any partnerships similar to involving the private sector who say, we love for you to be here at McDonald's while you're in high school and college, but let us help promote you becoming a teacher later in life or whatever?
Yeah, we didn't really look into those types of partnerships. We were mostly focused on like the education ecosystem, but I do think that there could be something interesting to learn from other industries, like the private sector that have had to upskill quickly. So thinking about, the tuition reimbursement policies could be something that could look further into, in addition to think about like campaigns for nurses, for example. There's like Johnson & Johnson has a whole website that's focused on like nurse pathways, right? So I think there are some things that we can definitely learn from the private sector, but we didn't really dive deep into that because we were focused on like what can educators do at the state and local level. Didn't really dive deep into private dollars.
Well, and I think, Terry, that's a terrific example of a focus area for next questions, right? And the idea that ESG is going to continue to partner with us around how do we look at and what questions do we ask and what kinds of information, because this is one of those dream big moments that we all don't necessarily get all of the time. And so if we're thinking past the legislation and thinking past what is currently happening, how do we expand this in a way that we've not thought through before, because we've only really been focused on educator workforce as opposed to private public partnerships and expanding the opportunities there. Because the other part of this is, from a commerce perspective, you bring businesses in when your school districts are strong, because you can actually recruit a better workforce for that business because their families want to come because your school districts are strong. So there's a whole cycle of community improvement that's involved in this. And that means that it should be a whole cycle of community involvement in how we expand the opportunities for teachers. And so that certainly goes in line with the earn and learn opportunities and making sure that these are paid, and I'd love for a teacher to know that from day one, they've been sponsored. They can get through their entire teacher program tuition free and not have to worry about the loan debt at the end, because we had those partnerships, because we recognize this connection. So I think that's terrific. We'll make sure that's on the list. Other questions from the group on the presentation thus far?
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. I'm glad you brought up the loan forgiveness. So when you were looking at maybe on the back end of people exiting into the profession, did you have conversations around loan forgiveness programs or continuing ed in terms of decrease costs for advanced degrees? I know you mentioned that it was in the grid of information you presented.
We did. I can provide some additional context on that, maybe to Dr. Murphy, but we did do a look at states that had loan forgiveness programs or scholarship programs related to teaching, in addition to the two highlighted examples in South Carolina and Illinois. They were both set up essentially as loan forgiveness programs. So if they completed their teaching commitment of 5 years, then their loans would be forgiven. If not, then they would turn into an actual loan that they had to pay back. So I can pull that data for you and show you some of the results from the actual completion, as assuming that the loan forgiveness was seen as an incentive to stay in the field.
It might be good also, Nicole and Lauren, we have examples of loan forgiveness programs that have been grant funded in the state, specifically in STEM. Western, UK, Louisville, Northern have all had them, and Moorhead has one as well. And so we might, I mean, it's very specific to the STEM teacher population, but we would also have some data to share collectively across the state in terms of if that moves the needle or not around the markers that we're interested in. And then I guess I'm the one who asked the question about where in the leaky pipeline in your work, if you looked at the test scores, Kentucky is pretty heavy regulated in terms of educator preparation and how you get into a teacher preparation program. And several of us on this call are involved in advocating for some flexibility for admissions regulation changes for educator preparation programs. And so I know you said that that wasn't something that you all necessarily looked at, but I think that would be very interesting if you could think about that and include that, as that is just one of the requirements that we currently live under in our state. And many of us on this call did analysis on our own data, and it was very glaring in it's keeping our future teachers of color and our future teachers from first generation populations out of teacher education programs simply because they cannot pass a test in even as much as 1 point.
Yes, that'd be really interesting to look at. I'll say it's great that you all are at the state level and you have your own data to look at, because we were doing this as, consultants doing state data requests. And so oftentimes, that level of data is not available, at least to provide within a short window. So it would definitely be interesting to look at that and see what can be done.
Hi, this is Bryn in Northeastern Kentucky. Margaret, that was such a good point, but I just want to make sure that whenever that conversation is dealt with, that we recognize that no one is suggesting that we lower standards. I don't believe that's what many diverse people want. I think what we would like to look into is the cultural responsiveness involved in the testing itself, and to make sure that it is a fair test and it does include backgrounds from different people. And I was watching some wonderful discussion by Nate, and they seem to recognize that that's very crucial and how that is impacting some of the test scores, and that might not be including everyone in a fair way. So we just want to make sure that that's clear. We just want to make sure that the tests are fair, inclusive, and we're not asking to lower any standards. There could be other reasons why some of those points are being missed, and we should look into that, not assume that they just don't know or not being trained.
Right, thank you. I was definitely advocating for multiple pathways towards admission, and Praxis has been, and ETS has come to several meetings and owned up to some of their misgivings on their original entrance in the exams and worked to refine those, although many of us are hesitant about them and would still like to advocate for multiple admission pathways that still honor the content knowledge and the core skills knowledge that our candidates bring to the profession.
And I think it is an excellent point on both sides. And I'm really pleased to see some of these standardized tests companies coming forward and offering that there is bias against different life experiences that have led to outcomes on the test that are not representative of what the test goals are. And that we continue to keep in mind that as we present ideas, that there are multiple recipients of this communication. And so when we say alternative pathways, performance-based metrics, that we're continuing to highlight the idea that rigor of our teachers, quality of our workforce is one of the efforts as a foundational effort for this group as well. So absolutely. Other questions? So I've been kind of keeping a second eye on our parking lot document, which is super active, and I'm very excited about that and hope that that continues. I'm also impressed with how colorful it becomes when so many people are participating on it. But I'm starting to see some categories of things, and I'm wondering if everyone is comfortable with the idea that we shift the focus of this conversation now to one where we're starting to form what are our questions, what are the groups in which we want to investigate, what are the areas of research. Is everyone comfortable shifting in that direction, or do we have more questions around the current national trends? Okay, so I'm just going to throw out a question for us to consider. What are the groups of people in which we find that we have underutilized within our teacher workforce? And so what I mean by that are things like adult learners, undergraduates who are currently going to college but didn't really ever think about being a teacher. So what are those groups of people? And then we can probably ask, well, what questions can we ask of those kinds of groups of people? So what are the groups of people in your minds? Dallas, can I offer your answer, which I'm hoping is going to be veterans, right? That's a group of people.
Of course, I was waiting to see if others might jump in. You know, people get tired of hearing about the military sometimes, but I do believe that's a very untapped resource. We do have, I don't have the metrics to show it, but we do have a significant number of educators that have a military background. And one of the things to keep in mind is every year, 200,000 military members leave the service, and those would be great resources. But more importantly, I think the spouses of service members is incredibly important. We could tap into it's a great community there, and there are some opportunities to help them get their degrees through the federal government. So that would be fantastic. Yes, very much underserved. And then on top of that, when we talk veterans, we need to think about the Guard and Reserve, which are already in our communities and are immediately available to us to integrate into our school systems as instructors. So it's something that could be a very quick win. It's about putting all of the pieces together to do this, and there are ways to do that. Again, back the University of Louisville with their NIT, they've created a nice pipeline. Jody Adams does that for the Kentucky Department of Education, and we can move a lot of folks into CTE areas. So I think we're underutilized there. I'll get off my box now. Thank you very much.
We like your box. It's not a box. We all accept the box. I'm going to throw out paraprofessionals. I feel like there's a whole crew of people in our schools presently who, because of financial limitations, are not able to pursue a full teaching credential or life or whatever the barrier. So paraprofessionals would be a group of folks that I would want to say, what are our barriers? Mm-hmm. Other groups?
This feels a little bit like robbing Peter to pay Paul, but I've heard a lot of people in the medical field are burned out after this year and are looking for new career pathways. But again, that feels a little, but it might be interesting to at least look at, you know, some of the people who are looking to switch careers.
We will take all the science teachers the medical profession has to offer.
Science teachers, math teachers, there's no shame here. No.
In Frankfurt, we have, this affects us more so than most other communities, but not, it is not strictly in the home of state government. But if you are a government worker, a city worker, a county worker, a state government worker, I can tell you a number of our folks are retired by 47, 48, 50 years old. They're done and out. And I can tell you I'm well past 50 and I do not see stopping working anytime in the near future. So I think that there are a large number of people in our communities who are well-seasoned workers, have been through an entire career and would be excellent candidates for a second career in education that we just don't tap into.
Love it. Love it. I also think, Terry, that I have a spot for you in my fall 2021 class if you'd like to join us.
See, that is so funny because just a minute ago when you went on this connects to that and this connects to that and a workforce, you get new jobs because you have great schools. I thought, oh, I got to find her a job in my office.
Well, that's my box. You know, Dallas has his box. That's my box. Is the whole. This is a community thing. So very good. Okay.
I had one suggestion of just something that I thought about. I know particularly we have some displaced workers, particularly in the coal mining industry in Eastern Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
BitSource in Pikeville is a company that has been successful in training displaced coal miners in working in the technology industry and computer science, IT, different things like that, teaching them to code. So that could be a possibility as well as teaching our displaced workers such as coal miners and are preparing them in the education industry.
And displaced restaurant workers for that matter. I mean, we have a large number of displaced restaurant and travel related workers. Generally, those are women, mind you, but they're looking for the advantage of being able to care for their children and work. And so a teaching career allows them to do that.
So Terry, that brings up a great point. There has been a mass exodus of women from the workforce because of the pandemic. And so this certainly is not a long-term group to target, but there is certainly a sense of urgency, as Terry said, around the fact that many of these women left because they didn't have childcare. And so whether they decide to return to their, current profession, if it's still, if there are still jobs there or not, is yet to be told. But finding ways to, get those transferable skills and train up a teaching workforce because it's 75% women already anyway. And so that could really produce a group of folks, at least in the short term, that might be willing to and interested in moving over into the education profession.
That also brings up a thought about credit for prior learning. We have a lot of people that are student teachers or teachers' aides. That's what the term I'm looking for. And I've done some work with the Council on Adult and Experiential Learning, and a teacher's aide could look at some prior learning credit that could easily be integrated into degree completion, allowing them to become teachers. And I think that's another area we need to look at. How do we integrate credit for prior learning?
I love that, Dallas. And that also relates to the work of one of the other continuum work groups as well. So that's definitely a critical piece to this. Other groups.
Continuing on the line of displaced workers, I know that there are many in the arts community that have been displaced because they just haven't had jobs as well. So that they're ones that are looking for alternative training, and then even in some media aspects have been encouraged. I know to look at alternative training as well. So looking at our arts community and what an amazing resource is already there. It's just getting the credentials that they may need to be in the classroom.
I think there's also a group, it's not a think, it's a no, Each university has an enrollment report based off of their success of bringing their first year class to campus for day one. And they call that the yield report. In that report, there's actually an entire population of students that didn't choose to necessarily go to another university. That's not why they didn't show up on day one. They actually didn't show up on day one because they didn't choose to go to college, not to a 2-year institution, not to a 4-year institution. They just chose to stay in their own community. To me, there's probably any number of reasons why you would choose to stay in your community, but if you've identified that community as your home, and that perhaps what is perceived as the salary differential, should you achieve and attain a college degree, isn't necessarily a big driver for you because you didn't make that next step. Let's talk about how you can stay in your community but still be a teacher in that community. And so I think there's an untapped resource of 18-year-olds who are choosing for whatever reason. And I think we need to ask them, why are you choosing to stay in your communities? And we don't want you to permanently leave your community, go back to your community, but join us for a little while to be a teacher.
Think, and we may already all be thinking this, but definitely the students in high school, middle school, I think you really kind of learn that love for learning, and that's where it begins. Kind of thinking about becoming a teacher, wanting to come back to the classroom, but definitely targeting those, students in general.
I love that, Logan. And I really want someone to answer the question for me is, we have all of these kids that we know in kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, they played teacher. They were the teacher. That's what happened. And then sometime between first grade and 8th grade, teaching no longer is a likely profession for them. And why is that? And I recognize that asking an 8-year-old what changed their mind is probably a difficult question to answer, but I think we need to look. What happens in that period of time of middle school? And do we need to bump the recruiting all the way down to 5th grade and not 9th grade, right? Are we missing the boat here?
I would argue that I'm thinking of the age group, the population, elementary school students, they take a lot from their environment. And so how they're treated and the quality of their education contributes a lot to, how they then say what I want to do in the future. I have a niece who's in the first grade right now, and she's very, very bright. She actually started school early, but her experience in kindergarten was terrible. There was a lot of cultural discontinuity between what she gets at home and then what her teacher was saying at school is, appropriate behavior or, what qualifies as a good student and a bad student. I'm just going to use an example. I think she said, shut up. And her teacher was sending home red face after red face because she was saying, you didn't have a good day based upon saying this word. Literally, that is what was written, on her note. She said, shut up today. And that was enough to warrant a red face for the entire day. So by the end of the school year, you would ask her, are you excited about school? Do you like school? And she was saying no. And I think that will totally change the trajectory of what she then wants to do. If the school environment wasn't a good one for me, I certainly don't want to be back there for a long-term profession. So I think that gets back to what we've been saying about cultural competence training, implicit bias, and a lot about, that cultural discontinuity. What we're saying is appropriate behavior in your mind might not be what our students come to school with from their home environment. And we have to make sure that we're able to meet in the middle. I just think that is at least a contributing factor.
Culturally responsive classroom management. Yes, please.
I think
Cameron, if I can.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
to go back to their environment, I think that, and I can use Frankfurt again as a great example, because if I can tell you of 5-generation families who have all worked in state government. So I think that it is very often that as a young person, when you lose sight of what you really want to do, you get out of high school and all you know is you want to get the heck out of town, and you get into college and you kind of thought you might want to do this, and then you didn't really want to do that. And very often you go back to the career that you saw your parents in for a number of years. And so we very seldom see men and diverse and minorities in the classroom. And so we start off behind because they don't have an example to learn from and to build up that security. I mean, like my mom, if my mom was in a career, I'd feel very secure in that career because I've really lived it my whole life. Whereas they have no security within this career because they don't have anybody that they have been, I don't want to use the word mentored by, but I mean, that's kind of the word, throughout their life. So there's no comfortableness within this group in this career field.
Yes. And Sherri just summed it up for you as you cannot be what you cannot see. Absolutely. And I think that's a big component to it. So Nicole, that does lead me to perhaps add a question to the list, which is outside of the groups that we were thinking about, but moving more towards what are the questions. What are the effective mentoring practices that are available as models in the country? What programs, what schools can we look to? I know Jim Flynn added a little bit ago about Boys and Girls Club and how they work through a mentor model that certainly is one for us to look at as something to expand in this region. But what are some others? I think that would certainly help to inform the conversation. What are some other kinds of questions that you all want to ask these different groups?
Dr. Murphy, if I could jump in really quickly, just to piggyback on Cameron's point, from the other lens, I think one of the common refrains that we hear is like not only the cultural competence of the classroom itself, but if a student has a negative experience, like why would you want to go back into that space that was very harmful for you? And so I think the answer is they don't, or they go in with a social justice lens to say, I want to make my community better. I don't want students to have a similar experience than I did, so I'm going to be the change. And so I think that when you think about recruitment strategies of students of color, especially in urban, populations that we spoke to, that's a common refrain that we heard was that students that are in high school were attracted to the early educator programs because they saw it as a social justice and citizenship and civic engagement piece as a part of the career, and not just like, I'm going to teach because I love math or the subject matter itself. So I think that's another thing to think through. The mentorship piece, we could definitely look into further for some exemplars there.
Well, and also to your point, Nicole, what was the key within that mentor relationship, right? What was the driver for that person to even want to join the group or take advantage of that mentor opportunity? And they saw that social justice opportunity for them, and it resonated. So what are the components in there? So, and Cameron, we saw that you added in financial. And that is absolutely, let's ask lots of questions about what are the financial barriers. That's one of our guiding questions too, is for districts. What can districts do to incentivize, what can we do as a Commonwealth to incentivize districts in the hiring practices, but that also serves as a recruiting function as well. So Dallas, you had your hand up.
Yeah, talking about the culture of the environment and why students might want to go into the teaching profession, it just prompts me to think that schools that have programs like Leader in Me, which is character development, or Junior ROTC, which is about citizenship, would those schools be a question for research. Would those schools be more likely to cast a more positive culture and then draw their students into the teaching profession? Is that something that's been researched, or could those questions be asked? I think we might find that by doing some character development, which used to be the rage many years ago, it's fallen off now. How do we create better cultures to improve the quality of life for not only the student, but the teachers too?
Absolutely. What are the characteristics of those schools that serve to promote the idea that teaching is a viable and attractive profession, rewarding profession, right? And Kim, I think your point about old ghosts, I don't consider K-tip an old ghost. I still consider it on vacation, but I think your question is well founded, which is, what are the induction practices that are necessary in order to support new teachers and diverse teachers specifically? How do you help a diverse teacher or a first generation teacher work their way into that new school and environment and culture? And so that's a terrific question for us to say nationally. What are the induction practices that support the growth and success of a diverse workforce as they enter those first couple of critical years? Cameron, you're offering us an example, and I can't read and talk at the same time as much as I like to pretend that I can. So do you want to share with us?
Sure. I was just adding to my comment about the payment for teachers. I was saying in a lot of counties, I know definitely Jefferson County and Fayette County, getting a rank 1 also comes with a pretty healthy step increase in terms of income. However, getting a rank 1 means getting a master's. And that can be anything from 30 to 60 hours. And that also means having to then find, again, additional ways to fund that higher education. And so when you're already struggling coming in to get into a 4-year program and afford that and see that through, to then have to complete a rank 1 in order to get to a point where you're living comfortably wage-wise is a tall task, and it can make it very discouraging to continue with that profession because you're having to do a significant amount of education and you're not seeing the reward for that on a financial standpoint. Particularly when I came into teaching, a master's was required. And there wasn't anything within my district that said, we're going to help you pay for this master's, or we're going to, pay back any loans that you incur, even though the master's was required within 6 years to keep your job. And then I wasn't seeing financially, as being a teacher is a work of heart. And so I wasn't in it because of the money I was making, because even after, you get that master's, I'm just getting to a point where some of my peers had started coming in as engineers and, other such professions that they graduated from in their bachelor's program. So, I just thought that was critical when, you're talking about these step ups that are offered. Those shouldn't be an appeal because they offer more money just to get you comfortable. And certainly students need more help, because if you already are struggling to financially afford that 4-year degree to get into the profession, then anything beyond that is, equally, if not more difficult.
Cameron, I think your points are just absolutely well made. And I think the total cost to be a professional and the total cost to be an educator is something that needs to be real and considered, and is part of those series of, while there's series of steps, there are also a series of barriers, right? And so our questions can absolutely work to address each of those barriers along the way. I also think that brings up yet another opportunity for a private-public partnership, because those teachers that district has already recruited who are interested in those rank changes the businesses should be interested in them getting those rank changes as well, because of the professional experiences and the growth of the strength of the teacher workforce as a function of that. So absolutely, let's make sure all of this is in that parking lot that we're going to work on sorting here in a little bit. Other thoughts as we wrap up our research discussion for the moment, obviously very rich discussion.
I just want to highlight one portion of what Cameron and I think maybe Jessica has mentioned as well in terms of first generation students. We have a healthy amount of first generation students who become teachers in the state of Kentucky. For example, in our College of Education alone, a third of our students in teacher preparation are first generation students. And one of the biggest barriers we see is actually that 3 months in between when they graduate and when they first start their job. And that barrier being a financial barrier, they're no longer eligible for financial aid. They may not have necessarily saved any money. They need to make rent. They need to pay bills, etc. But their school paycheck does not start until the middle of August. So being really intentional about those financial thoughts and implications. Some districts I know are working towards that, but it is a very big reality. And we have lost teachers, especially those who are first generation, to just that 3 month gap. And so if you think about what is that 3 month gap in a monetary amount, it's minimal compared to the potential impact they have on our profession.
It is one of the blessings of the curse of the pandemic, right? Margaret, is the idea that now we've got school districts who have new access to monies to manage summer learning opportunities, and now they're recruiting our newest graduates even sooner. So it'll be interesting to see this summer whether those same students, not same students, but the students from that same category experience a different summer because they've had access to employment opportunities that are directly professional related, but allow them to manage that gap, because it is a significant gap. Life takes over. Yeah. Any other points of research at this point?
Hey, Corinne, just real quick, I'd like to jump in on that because I've talked to a few students just on how many hours of observations do they have to do? Is it like 200 hours or
200.
something like that? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a few students point out that trying to balance their lives and work, they had to work to pay for school, and then they wanted to have, a social life too, and then to do their schoolwork and their other classes. They brought that up to me. I don't know if that's something that you all have looked at in terms of, quantity versus quality, but that's a specific thing that some students have mentioned to me that we were trying in our Grow Your Own program when I was a superintendent.
I think that's a great point, Jim, and it's one of those points that we have to look at within the ed prep experience. Is that serving as a barrier, and is it a good use of time? But also, how can we incentivize it so that it eliminates the duplication of experiences that we're seeing, right? If you can get paid for your practicum experiences, like the same way that we pay other people to do internships, so not just student teaching, but actually saying, if you have to do 200 hours, how do we fund those observation hours? Because it's only the first 10 are really observation. Everything else, you're actually in the classroom helping the teacher, doing work. These are payable experiences, and we have to figure out. So I think that's a terrific point to add to our list of things to look at. Nicole and Lauren, are there paid field experience opportunities that exist nationally that could serve as a model to say, Commonwealth, we can eliminate the rule that you can't be paid to do these things?
Could we also look at apprenticeships? Would that not fit into that same category?
Yes.
Which there's a big push from DOL to look into apprenticeships. I think that's another avenue to solve that same problem.
That's great.
Yeah. I had this dream when I was superintendent of because we needed, to support kids that were struggling to meet our learning goals. And so they would do better with more one-on-one or smaller group attention, but we didn't have the staff to do that, right? So I used to want to do that very thing, but I never did find the time or find the resources to operationalize it, but that would be really cool. And if Senator Wise is still on there, maybe that's a good, we had a good conversation the other day about kind of this whole concept that we're talking about here on how do we recruit, retain, and develop high quality professionals to serve in our schools. So, maybe there's a way to even help districts operationalize that, kind of build the structure and seed the funding.
I think maybe Arizona State has a system that they use where they help pay. I could be totally making this up. It's somewhere in Arizona, but I think it might be Arizona State. But I think the problem that I don't know that they're studying that through an equity lens at all. Because I think part of the problem with that was that the districts who could afford to do that were the wealthier districts. So the wealthier districts were able to provide the resources that the districts who didn't have as much money were not able to fund. But I think that there is a system in Arizona State where they use 2 or 3 different clinical students who are paid as teachers, but they partner. They have this triad where they teach. They're still students, but they teach and get paid. I could be making up some big terrible story, but I think Arizona State might have a model like that.
Well, and then I was even thinking with the federal relief dollars and the education recovery needs and what districts, you might build a structure and actually pilot to see how effective it is. And we actually have some resources that districts could do, but we might need to seed the ideas and the ways to do it. But those pre-service education students would be a valuable resource in that work.
Absolutely. Good.
I just wanted to add that another benefit to at least offering a stipend for student teaching are the living expenses that come with it. I remember when I was doing student teaching, they do ask you where you would prefer to be placed, but they can't guarantee it. And so, I was saying, well, I prefer to be in Lexington or Louisville because, I'm from Louisville. I have a home I can stay in, or I live in Lexington right now and I have a home I can stay in. But I had several friends who were in the same position and they could not place them in the city. And so they were having to drive an hour away or so. And then because we don't get paid, they were then having to make that trip back, here. And when you're student teaching and going, and actually, we had observations to do prior to even getting to student teaching. They want you to be as immersed in the classroom and all the functions of the school as possible. And so if that meant staying after school to help with different activities, or you were going to have a long day, it meant that you were also going to have a long night because you still had to then drive home and then do it all over again the next day. And that is a lot to do when you're not getting paid. You're not getting paid for gas. You're not making anything in order to try and help with your, shelter or anything of that nature. So it definitely would be helpful to offer that or some type of recourse for students having to do that.
Very good. That's not very good. But that's a very good point, Cameron, is that it's a huge ask that most people really can't easily fulfill, right? And yet we're still asking it year after year after year after many, many classes of students. So we have a fantastic list so far, and I have a feeling that it's just going to keep growing, which is terrific. This is why we have quite a bit of time together to work through all of this. I think this was a fantastic first conversation of this group. Really excited to see all the different perspectives. Continue to work in the parking lot. We will offline work to kind of group those things together. We'll work with ESG to set forth a priority list as to how we're getting this information, and we'll make sure that it is then provided to all of you. So Amanda, is it fair to say that at our next meeting, we would likely hear some potential outcomes of some of the initial questions that we've asked? When is our next meeting? I should know that.
Yeah, so your next meeting is May 14th, so exactly a month. Yes, because today's 14th. So we will definitely have this organized by what you all shared. I think the Google Doc is key today, that we are going to model that with the other work groups, because I really think it helps capture not what we hear, but exactly what you're trying to say. And you guys even put links in, so you're so resourceful. Thank you. So that's going to be really helpful to narrow down what actions you would like to focus on in this work group, of what you'd really like to pursue, and additional information. And I think this is a great start. And so as Dr. Murphy said, please add to it as you see fit. You have the link, and we can send that out in an email as well. But we'll definitely work to put them into themes, common themes, or those topics that tend to bubble up the most. And I think that will help set the priority of the groups that you all have brought forth. And I really love how you even identified the audiences in which you were trying to seek out the folks that you're looking for. Because I think there are individual strategies around the different groups of people that you would like to see recruited into the field. And this is not starting from scratch. There's so much good work already happening in our state that's really taking off. I know Ellie probably had lots of notes and things, because this is a lot around their work of what they do, which should really be empowering, really. And I think we could even, if there's more questions on there of just what we're doing currently, or additional questions for Lauren and Nicole, who've been incredibly resourceful, I think it will be helpful even to pinpoint some of those areas for a deeper dive, maybe into, things that bubble up in my mind is, how do we even pay for these things? So what do we give up, or where does the funding come from if we were prioritizing? So, you guys are going to have an opportunity to set forth your goals around actions you would like to see taken, recommendations, and even possible legislative agenda items. And so that's all really organized into when we meet with the continuum. And it's really, this work specifically is really going to be driven by you guys. And I am highly encouraged with the engagement and commitment to this work. It's exciting. And so I thank you. And hopefully, Dr. Murphy, that answers your question, but great job today. Wow.
It absolutely did. And I would also, Amanda, I'm glad you brought us back to Ellie. The public ed deans had an opportunity to speak with KDE and Ellie's colleagues around some of the educator workforce, but really the it was Grow Your Own, but it was also Educator Rising activity and efforts that are happening around the state. And so I might offer to the group that perhaps we want to consider inviting that team to speak with us at our next work group meeting, so that we can hear what the current efforts are from KDE, straight from the folks who are making those current efforts. So we'll hear some initial feedback from our ESG partners as they continue this research on our behalf, which we're so appreciative of. You have no idea. And then Ellie, if I could lean on you, assuming the group is nodding their heads yes, that we could hear a little bit more specifically around what the state is currently doing. And then we can also use that as a team. We can look at that and say, okay, what there do we need to point to and say, continue doing that, keep doing that. And then also, what are our opportunities to expand beyond what is happening within that team? Is that good with everybody? Everybody okay with that? Ellie, are you okay with that?
Oh, absolutely. I was really excited because a lot of the things that were mentioned, I was like, in the last 2 weeks, these things have sort of happened within our group. We've made contact with additional universities to get partners for the teaching and learning pathway dual credit classes, which is a huge barrier. If half the state of a quarter of the state has access to those classes, then it's not really a viable pathway. But we've seen literally in the last 2 weeks, those opportunities are popping up all over the state. We're increasing those relationships. It's really exciting. And I'm going to drop in the chat, if you're not already familiar with Go Teach KY, if you haven't kind of explored our website and follow us on all of our fun social media, I'm the hype woman for the office, so that's kind of what I get to do. But there's a lot of stuff that's happening, and I really am excited to hear all of these things. It's very affirming, and to know that we're all kind of moving in that same direction. It's not just, it's not just happening in my little bubble over here, but it's happening everywhere. It's very exciting.
All right. Well, thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Amanda, and everybody else who helped make this call happen, Heather and Jennifer. And thank you all for participating today. We will see you 1 month from today, but we'll be in contact in the interim. And thank you to our ESG partners, Nicole, Lauren, thank you for the presentation. This is going to be exciting and fun. And with that, I think it's 2:59. It's really
Well
good.
done.
Okay. All right. Have a great month, everybody.